Hello, hello, hello. What's going on, everybody? What is going on? I see what's going on, Claire Corner, Riker. What's going on, Ebrav? Glad you can make it for just a little bit of time. Just still setting up. I just sort of woke up, so give me a bit. Give me a bit. All right, make it sure. Okay. There we go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Dungeoneers Pack Live. My name is Josh. Thank you guys for tuning in. What's going on, CBev? Thank you for showing up. Captain Copyright, what's going on? All right, Dungeoneers Pack Live is a weekly live stream where I and sometimes guests discuss topics for D&D 5th edition to provide insider solutions for problems you may have at the table. This week, we're going to be talking about the Sorcerer, so we're going to be going over the narrative aspects of the Sorcerer class to help you create and roleplay a Sorcerer character, and also answer any questions you have in the chat. So the big thing, hopefully my mic isn't cutting out. I put some noise filters and stuff to cut out some of the background. What's going on, Wally? Yeah, Sorcerer is one of the classes I've yet to actually personally play, but I've had enough at the table playing alongside me that they're a lot better than I think what people give them credit for, especially when they're compared to the Wizard. So before I jump into the difference between the Wizard and Sorcerer, let me go over what exactly is a Sorcerer. What's going on, NPC? What's going on, Scale? So, Sorcerer, what is a Sorcerer? Sorcerer is the charisma-based spellcaster who derive their magic from within. So they are able to exert their will over magical forces. But unlike a cleric and a warlock, they don't draw that power from an external source. Their power literally comes from within. They are not like a wizard where they have a knowledge and understanding of magic and are able to pretty much weave into the magical code of a setting. They are literally magic. There's something inherent in their bloodline, in their soul, something about them that makes them magical. So the big thing I've seen a lot of people discuss and talk about of what exactly it means to use charisma in 5th edition as the spellcasting stat for a sorcerer, while some argue that Constitution would be a better fit, and while Constitution would also make sense mechanically, the big issue with that is that it's completely imbalanced, and that's really the only reason why. Constitution would make a lot of sense because it's your power from internally, but I believe Constitution is more of a reflection of physical health, at least in 5th edition, while charisma makes sense because your charisma is not only just your presence and your personality, how friendly you are with people. It is also used to explain your literal presence in the world, right? So and what I mean by that, it's like how much of a physical or magical or mental force can you inflict on reality itself. And we see this with spells like, I believe, Hold Person, or I want to say it's Hold Person, where you have to make a charisma saving throw. It's how much willpower you have. I would disagree, because if everything was or Constitution based for the Sorcerer, your subclasses like the Draconic Sorcerer would super excel, and nobody would actually really play anything else besides that, because it's just you're stacking your defense. There's ways to fix it, and they can actually perfectly do it, but given how Wizards is very stuck and rigid with how they want these classes to fit in certain spellcasting stats, they're not going to upend and fix Constitution to be more active in the game. All right, thanks for stopping by, Ebrav. All right, so Sorcerer is the charisma spellcaster that gets their powers from within. But there's other spellcasters in the game, and they have a clear identity, but one that people tend to really overlap or compare the Sorcerer to is the Wizard. So narratively, they are vastly different. And when I bring this up, it's just mainly the core identity of what is is in D&D, not necessarily what sorcerer and wizard are in the greater pop culture sense, because wizards and sorcerers in a great pop culture sense are interchangeable. Their words interchange. Harry Potter is considered a wizard, but in actuality in D&D he would be a sorcerer. And then you have a character like Doctor Strange from Marvel Comics and the MCU, who is called the Sorcerer Supreme, but in D&D he'd actually be a wizard. So, but in terms of D&D, what exactly is the sorcerer's relationship to a wizard? As I've already said, a wizard must learn their magic. They must learn the magical code. The sorcerer feels their magic. They are just connected in some way that is not necessarily can be explained at all times. There's just something about them that their makeup is changed. And I'll go over different ways how you connect with magic in a second. The best example I can tell you what the difference between a wizard or sorcerer. A wizard is the computer programmer that is trained and learned to read and write code. A sorcerer is Neo. If you remember the scene in the first Matrix, all of a sudden, like right at the end, where he just starts to see the Matrix, he sees it for what it is. He sees all the code going on there. That's pretty much what a sorcerer is. They kind of can see the weave or whatever magical arcane forces are in the world, or they just feel them at some extent, and they are able, through their own willpower, bend them, change them to whatever they need to do. So the big thing, what makes up Sorcerer Origins, is exactly what or how do they get their power. So sorcerer very much have a superhero origin, if you really look at it. So oh yeah, if it would be more fun, there's like certain classes that would actually make more sense with other stats, like Warlock originally wanted to be intelligence, right? Like there's just different avenues that they could play with certain classes, and the people at your home game, you're perfectly right at changing it to have it just having the stats play a certain way. You're within your right, as long as you guys are having fun at the table. My big thing is, who cares about balance at times? If you guys are having fun, that's all that really matters. I think it only comes down to it mattering at maybe trying to think at Adventures League tables, right? Anyway, so Sorcerer Origins, I have 3 different Sorcerer Origins that you can draw from, and especially you're drawing from comic books, because that's really what the sorcerer's subclasses kind of lean towards, these magic fantasy inspired superhero origins. And I got the first question. Let's see, before we get into the origins. How do you feel about Pyromancer Sorcerer that never made it to full print? In general, I want to see more elemental based subclasses. So a fire, water, earth. See, the earth elemental or the earth sorcerer subclass never made it either, and that was actually pretty interesting. It pretty much was the sword mage from 4th edition, and I believe in 3rd edition, but mainly a lot of the features I saw from off the top of my head were 4th edition features that never made it. It was awesome. It would have gave the sorcerer its own Gish class that all the other spellcasters in the game currently have. Even Druid has a somewhat Gish one with the Circle of Spores. Off the top of my head, I believe that's what it is, because it gives you the temp HP and boost your melee hit as long as you have that temp HP. Yeah, and the cleric has a ton of melee spellcasters. Wizard has Blade Singer. Warlock is Hexblade. So giving them the Earth Elemental one would have been fine, and having a Elemental Fire Blasting subclass would have been sweet. Like, I don't get why it never made it. But if you look at the UAs, there's the Pyromancy one, and there's, I believe, also the Phoenixborn one, which are pretty much two similar ideas. Yeah. Seth Taylor brings up another point. Draconic Blood Sorcerer is a Sorcerer Gish, just not good at it. It's not like it gives you the alternate armor defenses using your con and your dex, I believe, but it just isn't that good at it, which is unfortunate. I think a Sorcerer Gish would be pretty sweet, but since they alter the rules for Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade no longer interact with Twin Spell, they have to do it in a way where it's just naturally going to get extra attack. Do you think an Elemental Bloodline can fit as a Sorcerer Gish option? I don't think so. I think it should be its own archetype, or subclass, I mean. I think when you're looking at how certain element bloodlines work, or how people are going to imagine that fantasy fire, while there is some depiction of fantasies of having like flame swords and stuff like that, most of the time you see people that want to be a fire or pyromancer. In some aspect, they just want to like burn stuff. So Evocation Wizard's pretty good at that. And I think that one of the best, mechanically best supported blaster fire type is the Light Cleric. And I would like the Sorcerer to kind of step in and, especially with all the Metamagic and stuff, have some sort of like more of a elemental fire blaster, and then have an earth that would, I think the earth elemental bloodline would fit a Gish, which we're already seeing that they're messing with it a little bit. All right, Sorcerer Origins. So here's some ideas you can take when you're actually developing your sorcerer. That'd be really, really awesome if you're drawing from superheroes. So the first origin is called, I consider called the Mutant. So they're born with a magical bloodline. It manifests at a certain point in their lives. So this is pretty much the X-Men. That's really what it is. You're born with it. But the nature of how your bloodline affects your character, some questions you should ask is this bloodline a secret from you? Was this something that your family members or whoever your guardians or your character's guardians were kept it from you? And also figure out what the nature of the bloodline is. So what subclass are you gravitating towards, or that you're going to pick from the get-go that kind of generate a cool story that you can kind of have follow with your character. You're kind of trying to discover what it means to be a Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, Divine Soul, or you're just wild magic, etc. This is really, really great for plain touch races or non-plain touch races, as there's a clear narrative to follow, because non-plain touch races like I want to say humans, dwarves, your standard classical fantasy races, wood elves to some or pretty much whatever's not extra planar, and halflings, etc. They're not plain touched in most settings. So having them their sorcerer bloodline tied to that, it gives them a great narrative to kind of follow along and have their path and their character growth, trying to discover what exactly it means to be this sorcerer. What does this bloodline tie them to? So I think the easiest sorcerer subclasses to kind of tie this into, when you're looking at trying to figure out which one and you want to play a classical I'm born with magic and I'm trying to figure out my bloodline, Clockwork Soul Sorcerer is probably one of the newer ones, but I think is really solid. Draconic Bloodline is a classic. Divine Soul is a classic. And Wild Magic, you're pretty much free to be whatever kind of magic. You're just naturally magical, and you can tie it to whatever plane, whatever deity you see fit. It's pretty open. But there's also plain touch races like the Aasimar, the Genasi, and then also to some extent the Dragonborn. The magic and their sorcery magic is just an extension of their being, and it's not really a secret. And that Aasimar, Divine Soul Sorcerer, is perfectly fine. It makes sense why your half divinity, your half celestial bloodline would manifest into a Divine Soul. And Genasi is a tougher one because there isn't really that many sorcerer or elemental sorcerers subclasses. But then you can use Storm Sorcerer if you're going to be an Air Genasi, or even to extent Water Genasi, and use Storm Sorcery because there is some water overlap too. Really, really easy. And Dragonborn Draconic Bloodline is the go-to for that one. And I can even see depending on the Dragonborn, a Divine Soul, if you're going to really tie yourself to Tiamat or to a Bahamut. Those are other great options. Another origin that you can draw from for superheroes is the accident. So some sort of magical experiment or problem you interacted with that radically changed your character. This one doesn't get used enough. Most of the time I see people do a sorcerer, it's normally what I consider the mutant, the one that's just born with that power. But the accident is a very, very common superhero background, an origin story that you can perfectly draw from, that all of a sudden you take your character that was roughly had a mundane life and something happened, some accident happened to them, and all of a sudden, boom, they are now magical. So this is a common origin for characters like Spider-Man, The Flash, pretty much Captain America, Fantastic Four. The list goes on. So the thing to look at when it comes to this, what is the event? Figure out what the event or the accident that caused you to gain your character to gain magical powers. Some examples: a planar rift somehow, especially like you get settings like Eberron, where you're interacting in manifest zones where certain planes sort of interact with Eberron itself, and there's points of convergence where they overlap these manifest zones. Whereas your character fighting at a certain point and found themselves trapped in a manifest zone. And the same thing, you can use this in Forgotten Realms. At one point, what if your character's fighting and then there is some sort of Feywild energy that explodes, or Shadowfell energy that explodes, and all of a sudden, boom, you're Wild Magic Sorcerer or Shadow Magic Sorcerer. You become infused with that power. Another example, if you want to play more of a Storm Sorcerer, where you lost at sea during a storm, and all of a sudden, bam, you're hit by lightning. And your ship was hit by lightning, and you took a brunt of it, and all of a sudden, boom, you have storm powers. Another thing you can do is, did you touch a magical or cursed item that you shouldn't have? And all of a sudden, now you have powers, which could explain like Wild Magic or Clockwork Soul. So the big thing is just draw. The easiest way is draw from your favorite superhero comic, your superhero, and very, very easy to create some sort of accidental background. The other origin, I would say, is called the gift. So either some high-powered being or powerful being bestowed a magical gift that radically changed you. So this sounds very similar to a cleric or warlock, but the big difference between those is that the cleric and the warlock have their ties to power still directly to that source. If this powered being gives you that power, pretty much they gave it to you and it still is drawing from you. They've changed you in some way for you to continue to have your power. And this is more in the classical sense. If you multi-class with Sorcerer, this is like a good one to multi-class with, because it allows you to draw from both and explain how this multi-class works. Okay. See a Russian bot on my end, but oh, here it is. Goodbye, Russian bot. Boom. Okay. Les brings up Cobalt Dragon Sorcerer works too, makes you an Erd as well. And I agree with Mordecai, the new Mordecai book. They've actually changed the Cobalt stats a bit. And one of the new little features you can pick lets you draw from I believe, the Sorcerer spell list. And by doing so, it ties you back to the Draconic magical powered Kobold, and just doubling down on that with the Kobold, with the Draconic Soul or Draconic Bloodline subclass would actually be fine, work perfectly. All right, so the gift. Like I was saying, it's whatever, if a high-powered or powerful being bestowed magic and radically changed your being, either your soul, your bloodline, physically changed you in some way. Again, it's different from the Cleric and Warlock, as you are the magical person, and the power is directly coming from you, while the Cleric and Warlock's line of power comes from either a deity or another higher power being. So big ways to think about how this works. Do you see these powers as a gift or a curse? Necessarily, what did you do to achieve and be given this gift or this curse? So if you were a hero, did you accomplish a heroic deed and given this power as a reward? This is a very big story narrative point that they brought up at Fizzbands to give those draconic feats that they introduced in theirs. So that's another way you can look at it. Or you can take a page out of Baldur's Gate 3, for those that have played it, where you're captured by the villain and then they experiment on you. And they changed you in some way. You can also take the mad scientist route where somebody physically was experimenting on you and changed you in some way. This works in settings like Eberron and Ravnica because there's a lot of artificer science-based wizards in those settings that have a history of being able to manipulate magic and infuse it into people. So perfect origins or subclasses that fit with this would be Aberrant Mind, the Draconic Bloodline, Divine Soul, Wild Magic. Really solid in this bestowing a gift or a curse onto your character. Claire Corner says, let's bring this up. Anyone else think it's weird sorcerers need to spend points to change spell types when the scribes wizards can do it for free? Yes, I think it's a little weird, but I think got to consider the narrative implication of how those work. The scribes wizard can only change the damage type, and it has to be on a feature of another spell that has another damage type of that same level, right? I think that's how it worked. While the sorcerer can manipulate their spells as long as they have the metamagic points to do so in any way they have, as long as they took those metamagic options, right? The big narrative distinction, and I think this is the scribe's wizard is hacking the code. That's how I see it. They've learned to manipulate and change the code to just change a specific aspect of the spell to pretty much just change the damage type. While the sorcerer, depending on the metamagic you change, which they have a very similar metamagic that lets them do that from Tasha's, they're able to warp and shape the spell to how they need it. Again, it's more so them imposing their will on it versus them hacking. But if I can, let me see if I can bring it up for you guys. I think I do have Tasha's, so I can bring it up. We can kind of look at the difference. I want to say they're a little. I personally want to say that the Scribe's Wizard is a little bit more limited in this, but I could be wrong. Awakened Spellbook. Okay, no, they get to do it unlimited times. That is a little weird. Yeah. But the limitation, well, I'll bring it up right now. Here we go. So we can bring it up. So this is the point where Claire Corner is bringing up. So the limitation for this, really, where it makes it limited for the wizard, is the fact that it has to be a spell level with a different damage type of equal spell level. So this is why they don't really limit it. So you can do it a number of times, but if you only have a fire spell and then a thunder spell at second level, then you're only going to be able to switch between those two types. Oh yeah. So yeah, let me see. Wolfsbane says, possible missed opportunity for Descent into Avernus as a devil sorcerer other than reflavoring Draconic or Shadow, so they don't have many options. I'm going to go into some of my ideas in a second on potential subclasses we could see from the sorcerer. I feel like having to spend sorcery points and having to take transmuted spells is a detriment to the sorcerer narrative. I agree. I think part of the problem I think you're going to see with Sorcerer mechanically. Oh, let me bring it up, and actually I'll put it back up on the screen. You're going to see this a little bit, and it hurts the narrative just a bit. Let me pull it up. There we go. So one of the things you're going to see with Metamagic, you get Font of Magic, which you get sorcerer points at 2nd level, which is cool. Great. You can't do anything with them until you get to a whole level. So the only thing you're going to be able to do with Font of Magic and your sorcery points at 2nd level is to regain spell slots, which is still really good, right? But you don't get to do the cool thing of being able to shape your spells until level 3. And even then, I believe you only get 2 Metamagic options. And it isn't until level 10 where you get another Metamagic option, which is really weird. And then level 17, you get another Metamagic option. This could be frustrating because this is like the cool point, right, of the sorcerer. You're being able to manipulate your spells. But you're only... Let's see. Let me pull up Metamagic. I don't want to speak wrong on this, but yeah, see, so you're only going to get 4 Metamagic options as you level total when you hit 20. So for most people that are playing in a campaign, right, most people that are playing in a campaign, average, you're only going to see 3 Metamagic options. So from levels 1 to 10, that's most average campaigns played. If you're playing straight out of a book, I think the highest you're going to get is 13 on most of them. But most campaigns last from 1 to 10. You're only getting 3. Like, if I were to see this reworked, I want more Metamagic options. Because the only other way you're going to get more Metamagic options is if you go into... You get the feat. The new feat from Tasha's. Which I think is Metamagic Adept. So that's like the big thing. To give the sorcerer more of these, of like this kind of stuff. I would have loved to see if they reworked it and have some of these Metamagic, like you get access to special Metamagic options based off your subclass. That would have been sweet too. Like there's a lot they could do. But I know Wizards probably isn't going to do a full hard rework. Wally says, I love to see the careful spell fix. A sorcerer instinctively casting their spells, they should be able to weave it around their friends if they have the careful Metamagic. I agree. I think there's big opportunity for that one. Yeah, they really should just draw from the Evocation Wizard because it makes a lot of sense that they would be able to do that. Okay, let's go back. So, what are ways that we can have the subclass mechanics or the themes of a subclass influence our character? We're speaking about Metamagic. Metamagic is a great mechanic when you're actually able to use it and to use more of it. Again, it shows how your character can manipulate magic. They impose their will on the magical forces. Ways you can use this to inspire your roleplay in combat. A lot of people kind of forget that you can roleplay in combat. That's just a big thing. They're not really descriptive of the things that they do. We see the best example of seeing how kind of to do this is in Critical Role. Normally they only do it when they do crits, but Matt Mercer does a great job of like describing how the flow of combat goes when it comes to a player doing a spell. I would say as a player, take that as inspiration and describe like what you're doing to hit. Trying to hit the target. And the same thing with Metamagic. Describe how or what your character is doing and how they're shaping the spell. Right? Are they doing it through sheer willpower? They're just trying to force magic to conform to what they need it to do? Or are they tapping into some sort of emotion or memory and using that to help shape the spell in some form? And then you could take that out of combat. So out of combat, if your character is forcing their will on that spell, are they exhausted? Are they tired? Do they need time to kind of relax and catch breath? you can play that off. Or if they're tapping into some sort of emotion or memory, does it change their mood out of combat after that? Do they need to have a mental break, or do they need to kind of talk it out? It helps build roleplay in some way with a character, or especially if they're bonded with a specific character. They're drawing on some sort of memory or some sort of emotion that manipulates it, and they can talk that out with a character and maybe have that link back to their origin in some way, or something that's going on. There's a lot of opportunity in taking an in-combat aspect of the game, role-playing with it, and then moving it out of combat to continue role-playing with the other players. Also, another opportunity you can take is just learning new spells. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Wally. Thank you. So, learning new spells. You could spend downtime role-playing your character, learning to manipulate magic in some sort of fashion. So they can see it like it's a piece of clay. There's this magical weave that they're kind of manipulating and sort of forming on downtime, that you can just say you're doing this. And they see it like a piece of clay that they're trying to form. And eventually, as you level, this could be your new spell that you're picking up. Or if your character is a little bit more cerebral, or is tied to certain more what would be like intelligence-based sort of thought. I think Evermind Sorcerer and Clockwork Soul kind of leans better for this. They see it like it's a puzzle, a Rubik's Cube, that they're weaving the weave and some sort of puzzle, so that they physically can just see and are trying to put it together in a way to create a new spell. I think those are some ways you can use to help you influence your roleplay and influence how your character approaches magic. And I'm trying to think. Let me pull up. We can pull up some other things. I think subclass wise. Let me go up here. Subclass wise. Here we go. And again, other themes that you can pull from your character is really going to come down to your origin, right? How your character interacts with the specific origin you crafted for it. I think that's the biggest through line narrative for a sorcerer, is how do they get their powers, and what are they doing with it afterwards? Are they needing to uncover the secret and figure out their ancestry? A sense of self-discovery is a way to do it. Or was it a gift or curse that kind of came onto them and they're just trying to learn how to figure it out? They're just trying to learn how to control it so that they don't harm other people. Or is it something where, since it is a curse, they're finding a way by the end of the campaign to get rid of it? Ooh. Interesting idea. Here's an idea. What if sorcerers got different spellcasting mods for each class? Wisdom for Divine Soul, Int for Aberrant Mind, and Charisma for Draconic. Interesting idea. I think it'd be cool, but also the other side of the table, I think, in terms of like optimization and all those, they'd be severely frustrated. I think it opens up a cool line of play though in terms of building, because you're gonna build characters a certain way. It definitely would make the sorcerer way more unique than some of the other classes. But also for like new players that I'm thinking is like, man, that'd be frustrating, because it's like, I want to play a spellcaster, but I don't want to have a lot going on, right? It's not that sorcerers are simple, because they have pretty much two resource mechanics going on, right? You have Metamagic, sorcery points, and then you have spellcasting. Now, if you throw like that system on top of that, that would be, and you're kind of trying to learn how to play the game, I think that would be frustrating for them. But for enfranchised players like us, that'd be cool. Like I would like to see that. I think there's ways they can do that without necessarily leaning the spellcasting onto it, right? Introducing more wisdom-based features, or having them be able to get access to wisdom-based, like for Divine Soul Sorcerer, wisdom-based skills. And same thing for Aberrant Mind and then Draconic, giving them access to certain skills or features that rely on those other stats. and have them have that as a second or third stat that they would use. That's one way. I know the game is leaning away towards that, wanting to make it even more streamlined to get you to focus on your main class's stat. But this is something this would have been seen a lot more with 5th edition early on. Wolfsbane said, I played a Sorcerer Warlock combo and my character watched a beloved NPC cleric die. We only had 2 party members and needed a cleric. I invoked and upcasted a quick and scorching ray and twin Eldritch Blast, which were about 6 at the time. I think Gilgamesh from Fate series. You are a laser, man. That is crazy. Imagine a world where we don't make all our game decisions based around maximizers and optimizers. The thing is, they're at the other end of the spectrum of terms of playing, and it's not that the game would be radically different if they weren't there. Optimizers and maximizers are needed in the community to show the limits. They work out the kinks and show what's broken in a way that when you do updates and find ways to know where to fix things so certain exploits don't happen anymore. And that's what I think. I say maximizers and optimizers as the beta testers in a way. They find the code and figure out which stuff is broken, so that if it's not working as intended, they could patch the game, right? And we've seen this already. We've seen this a lot where the optimizer community has found an exploit, or what we would see as an exploit, right? And then Wizards has went and changed it. Or you see maximizers or optimizers find another avenue of gameplay, which is another valid why they're important to the community, and they found another avenue of gameplay that's warranted, but it's obviously built in a certain way that it's very complicated, and then they'll just create a more simplified version and to make it simple so you have that style of gameplay in there. Seth says sorcerers should really be able to apply as many magics to a spell as they want, or progression to use more with higher levels. I think that would help in some aspects of like you as a character only getting a limited number of metamagic options. But I think it might have the issue where you start getting into the same problem as a key, where you're starting to just kind of use too much of it, too many of your points. But I think that is a great idea, though, to be able to use metamagic options multiple on a single spell. Since you're only getting limited, you're only getting 4, which is unfortunate. Ooh. Does a barbarian sorcerer combo work? Everything works. Everything works if you want it to work. Mechanically, it's rough because barbarian naturally doesn't like spellcasting because of its rage mechanic. But if you really want it to work, it'll work. I think there's some through lines that you can actually see with certain subclasses narratively that would make sense. Divine Soul works with a lot of different narrative aspects. I think that with what is that? If you guys can tell me in the chat what the divine, let me pull it up too. I think there's a divine barbarian subclass that I think Divine Soul pairs nicely with this. And I believe, what is it called? Oh, Zealot. Zealot would be a good one. And then Ancestral Guardians would probably be a good one too. All right. And thank you, Wolfsbane and Cleric Corner. Yeah, the Zealot will pair nicely with Divine Soul. Ancestral Guardian can pair nicely with Divine Soul. You play more of a spooky aspect of it. And that's how the narrative front to it. Let's see, Beast and Draconic Bloodline narratively would work really, really well because you can just change your Beast form as your Draconic form. And then your Draconic Bloodline just adds a little extra spice onto that. Let's see, trying to think. Storm Sorcery and Storm Herald would be another narrative if you play up the Tempest angle of it. would work narratively really well. And again, I'm talking about narrative, not necessarily mechanically. There's some non-bows with Barbarian just because of how Rage functions and you cannot spellcast, which is unfortunate. The Wild Magic Barbarian and the Wild Magic Sorcerer is another one that narratively makes pairs really nicely with each other. And it's something I may have to try to look at and see how I can mechanically have one of these work, how you can mix a Barbarian with Sorcerer. Maybe a build I can do later. It's a nice puzzle for me to try to figure out, because there's a lot of overlap in terms of some of these themes with the Barbarian and Sorcerer, because they both draw their power from inside. But Beast, the Barbarian is more primal and either draws that power. It's more like a physical manifestation, and if it is magical, that magic kind of stems from different sources at all times. Yeah, Draconic, I like this one too. This one's awesome. Yeah. Draconic, a totem with the totems representing different worms. Yeah. So that'd be sweet. It'd be super sweet. Okay. Sort of my last thing for this is I was asked in the Discord. So I'm active in my Discord. I'm active on a lot of people's Discords. I'm active in Cleric Corner's Discord from time to time. Fry Minis. If you guys haven't checked out the channel, please go check it out and go sub to them. They do great stuff. I'm active in the Destructive Boys channel too from time to time. Also check out his channel and Rich Mary's. All of them are doing great stuff. Go check out the channel. I'm in their Discord. I'm also active in my Discord, which you can find in the description below if you want to go and hang out and talk with me more about all these things, builds, narrative, etc. But in my Discord, they wanted to know what other sorcerer subclasses or Ridges I would like to see. What other subclasses? And I had 3. And one of them, one of you guys actually brought it up earlier, which was some sort of fiend-blooded sorcerer, which makes a lot of sense. You already have the tiefling race, and then you have a bunch of tiefling sub races that were introduced in Mornicaden's Tome of Foes, and they are tied to different bloodlines of devils, and some sort of fiend-blooded sorcerer where you draw your power from either some sort of demon magic or devil magic would be a counterpoint to the Divine Soul Sorcerer. But also, if you want to play a tiefling that is tapping into their bloodline, this would allow you to do that. Or you're playing a character that is tied to some sort of fiend and doesn't realize it, and is kind of working through this tied to dark evil deity and their bloodline, the ramifications of that. You're not necessarily a tiefling, right? But for some reason, your bloodline has Asmodeus is somehow your great-great-grandfather to some extent. All right, and the thing is, this is a big narrative, like big character fantasy that's found in a lot of shows, especially in anime and then video games. I think Devil May Cry is like the main protagonist, Dante. That's his big driving point, is his blood ties to his dad, which is a devil. Hey, thank you for joining, Will Spain. Glad to have you by. And let's see, Cleric Corner said, we need a Genasi sorcerer as they get magically literate from a bloodline where we first got it in the Warlock. And I agree. That's my next one. Some sort of elementalist subclass that draws their power from the elemental chaos. And it could be very structured like the Genie Patron Warlock. I think that gives the perfect setup to kind of give us an elementalist spellcaster. Another one. But also have it so that we don't have one of each. You just pick this one and you kind of focus on it. And they all kind of do similar things, but different at the same time, based off of the damage type you chose. But I agree. That's another one I would like to see, some sort of elementalist. And then another one I'd like to see is a Fey Origin. So they already show that you can be Fey touched to some extent with the feat. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Captain Copyright. So a Fey Origin would be awesome. So we already see there's multiple Fey Origin subclasses out there, and then we have the Fey Touch again, like I said, Fey Touch feat out there. So I would like to see that as a bloodline, especially for characters that want to double down on it. Like if you want to play especially the new goblins that are out there from Mordecanians and Monsters of the Multiverse, they're all Fey Origin. So having them tied to this sorcerer that is Fey blood would be awesome. That's gone on Rich, and actually speaking of Fey blood, Rich has I believe a fairy homebrew subclass for the sorcerer that he put out. That's super fun. That you guys might want to check out. I think another subclass I would like to see would be some sort of melee spellcaster, an actually solid one. I think a sword mage renamed as something else, but the mechanics would fit perfectly well with the sorcerer, and it would give it a different sort of identity. In reality, the sword mage I would have loved to see mechanically as a fighter subclass. And actually, let me pull this up on the screen for you guys to see. Let me see. So I can kind of go over what exactly is a sword mage. We're gonna get into some 4E stuff right now. Did you cover an ice sorcerer yet? No, and that would be another one, or that would fit under the elementalist. But an ice sorcerer would be pretty sweet. Like the sorcerer lends itself really well to elemental based or planar bloodline type stuff. And it's really unfortunate that the subclasses we're getting for them don't really tap into this too well. Okay, we're gonna go here. You go, sword mage. Okay, here we go. So sword mage was an arcane defender class in 4th edition. So 4th edition had a bunch of different character types that mainly focused on what kind of role you're going to fill in the party. So while 5th edition is focused heavily on a narrative aspect, while classes have a natural tendency to fit an archetype in combat and out of combat, it's not as rigid because how subclasses function in 5th edition, where they kind of let you bleed into a bunch of different stuff. 4th edition, no, there was no bleeding. Your class did a job, and it was very combat oriented, and it really focused on what you're going to do in combat, what role you needed to fill in the party. Sword mage was the defender, which would be a tank in most aspects. Oh no, I wouldn't mind it. I think when it comes to homebrew, you just go hog wild. I think just con as a spellcasting stat has some balance issues. Has just some actual balance issues, but as like a sub thing that, like, if it's a second supported stat to help out with the spellcasting, that would actually work. So yeah, so the big thing for the sword mage that I think is awesome, what we saw. Let me pull up another window. I can pull up the UA on the side right here. UA Earth Sorcerer. So I can pull this up so we can actually see this is where the Defined Soul, Phoenix Sorcerer, Sea Sorcery. Where are you at, Stone Sorcerer? Oh, we'll pull this up, but I'll show you guys right now why I think this is actually really cool. So Sword Mage had what is called a Sword Mage Aegis or Sword Mage Warding. So what this would do, you would be put some sort of ward on another player, and you could teleport to them to protect them. Or I believe you can put it on an enemy, and you could also teleport to them and attack them. So it's very much a highly mobile defender where you're kind of going in and from target to target to kind of like lock areas down, which is cool. Which is really cool. And then we saw this again in Storm Sorcerer, right? We saw this again in the Storm Sorcerer, And while I immediately recognized this idea, it didn't really hit the storm thing for me, or the stone idea. Let's see, Metamagic, Stone's Edge, Earth Masters Aegis, Stone Durability, Stone Aegis. So we saw it again with here. I don't think this needs to have the stone ties to it, but I do think finding a flavor and having this in the game at some point, and if it is under the sorcerer, would be sweet, as it gives it a Gish class. That'd be awesome. Rich. Oh, okay. I see some comments. I'm gonna address them right now. But I saw this one and I pulled this one. I 100% agree. We should straight up have a vampire sorcerer, let them turn into a bat and hypnotize people. I agree. That's another bloodline that you can actually follow, and that'd be super, super awesome. And I don't know why they haven't done it yet. And Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft would have been perfect for this. And then here we go. Claire Corner says, should Gishes have their own class? This has been a tough one because so many of the classes in 5th edition have the spellcasters, and even some of the melee, the marshals, have some sort of Gish, right? We have Eldritch Knight Fighter, the Artificer has Battlesmith, and then Armor. The Rogue has Arcane Trickster, the Wizard has Bladesinger, and the Hexblade from the Warlock. Druid has the Spore Druid, and Cleric has a bunch. Paladin itself is a Gish. The Bard has College of Swords and College of Valor. So the archetype is covered in multiple classes. Yet, folks still want a sword mage that's an intelligence-based half-caster. But I don't know if it has enough narrative weight to make its own class, since all those narratives are covered in other classes now. And that's frustrating. And I think as somebody is dabbling into homebrew and trying to find their own niche and try to create something that fits within it in its own thing, because that's part of the big thing I'm doing in my Discord. I'm trying to develop my own class. There is a need or a feeling that a half-caster marshal is missing in the game, but their narrative is taken up in every other class in the game. So how do you make that unique? And I think that's why there isn't some sort of half-caster, arcane half-caster at least. Paladin is there, Ranger is there. That's pretty much what they are. They're Gishes. They have magic, and then they can hit you with stuff. But an arcane version isn't there, and I don't know the narrative behind it. And that's really what it comes down to. 5th edition is very much more about narrative, the narrative behind things, and if you can break them down into even more specific kinds of narratives. Yeah, Drunken Yoda has the Scion also. Wolfsmith said one last thing. For the Devil Sorcerer would be a choice of type of power for each circle of hell. Maybe some spells or mechanics that fit that circle. Yeah, that would be actually pretty sweet. That would actually help out my Warlock a little bit. That is playing... He's a Tiefling Warlock of Levistus. And him maybe dipping into Sorcerer, and maybe that Fiend bloodline would give him some ties to Levistus, because Levistus uses ice, cold damage type. He's just trapped in a block of ice. And that would actually be pretty sweet to see the big difference between it. Zariel would have you much more physical. You'd probably take... that would probably make you a little bit more of a Gish. Asmodeus is your classic devil. Would you class the Matt Mercer Blood Hunter as a Gish? Not outright, but they do have the Warlock subclass for it, though. The one that gives you pack magic. So they do have a Gish subclass. I wouldn't consider it a Gish on its own, because it doesn't inherently cast its own magic. And I think that's the big mechanical thing. Can you cast magic on your own? No. Are they magical? Yes, but barbarian can also be said it's magical because there's a lot of barbarian subclasses that make them magical. Same thing with the fighter. There's certain fantastic aspects of fighter subclasses, but they're not considered gishes. Eldritch Knight is a gish because it specifically is has spellcasting. It can spellcast, and pretty much gish is more of a technical term. That's how I see it. It's a technical term for D&D to explain a person that has martial abilities and can cast magic. Narratively, though, they're a different thing. If a gish was just a narrative thing, almost every class in this game, and at least in 5th edition, is a gish to some extent. You just because the narrative fits it. Like most of the bard, almost every bard subclass is a gish. At least 3 or 4 of the fighter subclasses are gishes. Almost all of the barbarian subclasses are gish, if we're on a narrative level. But mechanically, I don't. They're not. And it makes sense though. Like you want to spellcast. But yeah, I think there's room for that, and maybe that's something we can explore. That's something I am doing in my Discord. Again, you can join in there and help me out there. I have a small thread going on there where I just kind of like shout out ideas and try to develop stuff. And a bunch of people are pitching in. The Gish idea I have for a class that is an arcane intelligence-based halfcaster is the angle we're going with. And while Artificer sort of fits this role, I think the big thing, narratively, it doesn't feel right. Because the Artificer is its own thing. It's the science bro, the engineer of D&D. So the angle I'm going with and trying to develop is playing with the dark or Black Knight archetype trope. The knight in soured armor is another name for this trope, or the anti-hero, where they use or have a connection to dark power and use it to pretty much bolster their martial strength and to continue to fight. But to try to do good things with it. And you see this trope a lot. You have it in World of Warcraft with the Death Knight. You have it in Final Fantasy XIV with the Dark Knight, literally just called Dark Knight. So it's something I think is able to kind of bridge, give it a strong narrative, while also filling that niche folks are saying, but we need a arcane halfcaster. I'm still trying to figure out. I'm struggling with having an iconic core class feature for it, but that's something I am doing in my Discord. If you guys want to join out, again, link is in the description. Let's see. We're gonna get into some magic stuff, but yeah, pretty much that's all I really had for the sorcerer. And Rich is asking, it's not a D&D question, but have you checked out the new magic block? Yes, oh my god, Kamigawa. I'm gonna pull up some art for you guys. You guys can see Kamigawa. This setting is ridiculous. This setting is visually amazing. We're gonna pull this up. So, for those that aren't aware, I'm a huge Magic the Gathering fan. Big Magic the Gathering fan. That's the other game I play when I'm not playing D&D. And Kamigawa was an old setting. It was actually the first set I actually ever played, the original Kamigawa, which was based on Japanese myth, but ancient Japanese. So you had samurais, ninjas, etc. And it's always a setting I always wanted them to come back to. One, because it was my first setting I ever played. First Magic set I ever played. That's how I learned to play. But I also felt like they can do things right. Well, they brought it back. They brought back the setting, but they came out with a twist. So Magic is a fantasy-based game, and they brought Kamigawa back as a cyberpunk setting. So all the magic is tech. They go hand in hand. So you're kind of seeing, oh, this is all art, different art. Yeah, and I'm hoping this sort of gets turned into a book. So let's so this is Moon Snare. You can see this. This is a ninja. And the cool thing about the tech and how this looks is that it kind of has this origami look. If you noticed it, which is awesome. that they managed to find a specific style that fits with it and still make it feel fantasy and unique. So this is Mutant Specialist. This is a ninja. You see this? Let's go back. Yeah, I'm hoping they turn this into a setting book. I think this is a good opportunity for Wizards and other Wizards crossover that also brings a unique setting and also allows D&D to work in a sci-fi 5th edition, to work in a semi sci-fi setting that also still uses magic. Because right now, Wizards 5th edition doesn't have a competitor to Starfinder. There's people that do sci-fi 5th edition conversions. I own a couple of them. Esper Genesis is one, and then Hyperlanes is another. You can find both of those on DriveThruRPG. But yeah, this set is visually stunning. Give us a video game as well. I don't know. Wizards isn't the best at developing video games. Or always picking. Baldur's Gate is an exception. But Dark Alliance recently, I don't know. All right, so this card's actually is a tribute or sort of a callback to Star Fox. So it's a Fox pilot. And yeah, Star Fox right here. So there's Kitsune or Kitsune. I believe that's how you say it. I'm probably saying it wrong, but they're Fox people from the original Kamigawa, and they made a pilot. Let's see. All right, I won't try to find some of my favorite stuff on here. Oh yeah, this is a dragon, so dragons do exist. Right there. Like the art is just probably one of the best looking. We'll go. This is land art. And people are like, oh, this doesn't really say this is like a fantasy setting. So all this stuff is based off magic. Everything is powered by the kami itself, which are the spirits. So they're drawing energy from the kami to power all this up. All the tech is magic. And this would be a sweet sort of setting. We already kind of see this sort of ideas in Eberron, and you can play this stuff in Ravnica in terms of like this high magic tech noir setting. Because that's what cyberpunk really is. It's like a science noir sort of feeling, but having some sort of rules to support it in 5th edition would be awesome. All right. We even got biker gangs, DJs. I'll pull up some samurai. There's even mechs in this thing. Like, ridiculous. There's mechs. And it all works. And that's what it's crazy. They make this all work. Let me see if I can pull some. Oh, this guy's my favorite. Let's see. Yeah, like set. It's ridiculous. I don't know how many commander decks I'm going to be making from this. Oh, here we go. They have Power Ranger Megazord 2, which is awesome. Let me see. I'll show you guys all the art, and then we're going to close up on this one. Just trying to see. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is all the collected art they have so far. So you see they have a DJ. Oh, there definitely is a conflict of IPs. You have Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, but since they're not Wizard owned, this is a perfect way for them to say, hey, you want to play Cyberpunk, like, but using our 5th edition rules, here's a setting that works with it, and it makes sense. And it's not complicated. And that's the angle that they have to go with Kamigawa. Like, it literally says, yeah, you still have all the magical abilities that you have in 5th edition. You can still use any of the subclasses you want. And here's a couple more that fit within the setting. And it still makes sense. And that's what you don't get out of Cyberpunk or Shadowrun, really. They're their own systems that admittedly are hard to get into. And I think Cyberpunk would have been a lot more popular if the game did well. But since it didn't, it struggled. Well, you know, it not many people are gonna Unless you're a diehard Cyberpunk fan, you're gonna go over to the roleplay. I wish that Seth brought up. I wish MTGs that don't get 5e hardcovers will still get plane shifts. I agree, and I think what ended up happening is that those plane shift covers were so popular. Those plane shift PDFs were so popular. They realized that there was a market for this, so now they're just shifting all that stuff into actual things they can sell, which is great. Adrian saying, I think there's one coming to Netflix. They just announced, for those that are into cyberpunk, the cyberpunk genre, they just announced that Blade Runner is getting pretty much a continuous show spin-off for Amazon Prime Video. So that's what you're gonna, and I believe it takes a couple years after the original, or not the original, but the latest Blade Runner movie with Ryan Gosling in it. And it's gonna, I don't know the extent. I know there's a cartoon out there too that kind of spins off all that stuff. Yeah, what's going on, Fred? Yeah, so there's a DJ. All right, and then we have rat people, biker gangs, which is sick. This is the closest thing to biker mice from Mars you're gonna get in the setting, like in a magic card, but like you get biker mice. That's sick. What's going on, SWAT Cat? We also got, samurai. The samurai are sick. And then, okay, this is like a mech suit. Like, imagine playing a armor artificer in Kamigawa, and then boom, your suit is like this origami looking mech suit. That's like sick. Super, super sweet. And then you get this guy. You can just tell how the samurai armor looks is just very unique to the setting, but still you could recognize, yep, this is a samurai. This guy is pretty sweet. And then you get the mech suit, or pretty much they call it the Titan Core. Let me see. And then what this does is actually turns into a Megazord. And, let me see if I can pull up the art. It's too sweet not to like show that off. I have to go to another site for it, but see if I can find it for you guys. And the set, it was on pre-release this weekend, and then I believe it will fully release next week. So give me a second. I know I can find it. I want to see the tokens, man. Oh, here we go. Boom. Pull this up for you guys. Pull this up. So yeah, so MTG picks is another one. So with this card, you do Megazord. It's sweet. So this little guy, you get a bunch of your stuff together, and you combine it, and it becomes Megazord, and then it turns into this. Like, that's awesome. Like, and this is the kind of crazy stuff like that they're doing for this set, and this is why I would love this to be a D&D setting. Let me see if I can find the alt art of like a good quality version of the alt art from for the Mech Titan Core. Because here, I don't think there's really good enough art for the Mech Titan Core, but okay, I have to blow it up a little bit. Okay, so this is the Mech Titan Core. Let me Let me find a way to zoom in on this boy so you guys can see. All right. So the alt art for the Mech Titan core, for those that know me, know I'm a huge fan of Gurren Lagann, and that's pretty much what this guy turns into. And that's pretty much what this alt art is. It's Gurren Lagann, has the little fin and everything. But like, yeah, like if you did this as a 5th edition setting, right, and like the big basis of this whole idea, they can use the vehicle rules and maybe have an additional way to adapt these to also make them turn into mech suits or something, and have an armor or have an artificer subclass that is dedicated to making mechs. Like that like, give me this setting for D&D. For a rogue subclass, give them a proper ninja subclass. Like they already did it with sorcerer. They can probably find some way to call it something cool, and it's pretty much a ninja. You get stats for Radfolk the Nezumi, and also maybe some Naga. Maybe give us alternate race traits for goblins here. Like there's all kinds of stuff they can do. Oh, yeah, this set. Like they even give you a little robo monkey to throw stuff. You guys, look at that. Bam. Yeah, so there's a lot they can do with this setting. Like just this art alone was ridiculous. But yeah. So on that note, I'm going way over. We were very, very off from sorcerer, but yeah. So yeah. So that is a sorcerer. This is Kamigawa. And again, thank you guys for showing up. Next week, I have no clue what we're going to be talking about. I will figure something out. I think now that I've kind of covered a lot of the classes that were requested on terms of narrative. Let's see. What is it? Next week in the 20th and then the 27th. So both of those, I might sort of cover. I'm thinking of covering pretty much player roles. Hey, what's going on? All right, thank you for stopping by, Claire Corner, Riker. Have fun. Yes, today is a Super Bowl. So I'm thinking next week I might start talking about, at least for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to start talking about player roles. So I did a video on this already, but I've seen some discussion about how to tank, and that tanking isn't a real thing in 5th edition. And I want to discuss that. I might actually see if I can bring in some of my more mechanically inclined friends to jump in on me and discuss how tanking actually works in 5th edition. I think that's what I'll go for next week. The 27th, I'll try to maybe figure out maybe double down on something other player role. But yeah, if not, it might start off my whole critical role focus in March, where I'm going to look at subclasses from Tal'Dorei and also discuss the Blood Hunter and also create builds for all this stuff. So that's what you're going to see on that. And if you guys haven't checked out, I have a new character build video bringing you pretty much helping you play a battle tactician on the battlefield using the new Monsters of the Multiverse Hobgoblin, pretty much using the interaction between the Fey-Gift feature and the Master Tactics feature from the Mastermind Rogue. If you guys haven't checked that video out, there's also some clarification on exactly how that worked in the description, or not in the description, but in the comment section, because I may have misspoke and said that you can do it unlimited times. In reality, it's Master Tactics that expands the Fey Gifts feature, but Fey Gifts only works a limited number of times. But still having help action as a bonus action forever is still stupid good. It's just Fey Gift can only be used a certain number of times, meaning the bonus traits you get from it are going to be to a set limit, but Master Tactics alters this a bit because it extends the range as long as you use them during combats, which is sweet. So yeah, Fred, there people are arguing that there isn't true tanking in D&D, and I disagree with them, because there is tanking. It's just not MMO tanking, which is the big thing. I'll get into that next week for sure. I think to kind of discuss that and talk about that, and how tanking is a viable, maybe not optimal, but viable in your game. Okay, so yeah, check this video out. If you haven't checked it out, leave a comment and everything. It's in the chat for you guys to check out if you haven't seen it. Other than that, you guys have a good one. Enjoy your Super Bowls. And for those that are going to celebrate Valentine's Day tomorrow, also have a fun and safe Valentine's Day. And with that, you can catch me on the socials, facebook.com/DungeoneersPack, YT, on Twitter, DPackYT, and on Instagram on DungeoneersPack. I'm trying to get more active on both of those. On all of them, I mean. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can do it here on YouTube, and also directly on Patreon. And for some stuff with Patreon, next week is going to be the first Patreon character build submitted by one of the patrons that support the channel. So again, if you want to do that, you can go to the Patreon and jump in on and support the channel. And as always, to support the channel directly, like, comment, subscribe on everything. It helps us get into the algorithm. All right, see you guys next week. New video character build next week, and streaming on tanking next week. You guys have a good one and take care.